The fear that kept him stuck didn't feel like fear. It didn't feel like panic, weakness, or anxiety. It felt like being careful, like waiting, like not rushing into the wrong thing. He told himself he was just thinking it through, just being responsible, just protecting his future. But deep down, something was holding the brakes, while his mind kept pretending the engine was the problem. This is the story of Ethan, a man who wasn't lazy, wasn't clueless, wasn't hopeless. He was trapped by an invisible fear that hid behind reasonable words. Ethan had goals that mattered. Not shallow goals, not vanity goals, but life goals. Better health, a better career, a stronger mind, a life that felt like it belonged to him. He even had moments of clarity where he could see the path. He would feel the urge to change, open a notebook, write a plan, and imagine the version of himself who finally stopped delaying. Then the moment came to act, and his body would slow down. Not dramatically, just subtly. He would check one more thing, wait one more day, adjust one more detail, and the momentum would disappear. He didn't call it fear. He called it timing. Timing sounds intelligent. Timing sounds mature. Timing sounds like a strategy instead of a surrender. Ethan's days were filled with small wins that kept him feeling productive. Emails, chores, quick tasks, tiny errands. But the one big thing that could actually change his life stayed untouched. At night, he felt the quiet pressure of unfinished potential. Not loud regret, just a steady heaviness that made rest feel incomplete, like his mind was still holding something it refused to face. He kept asking himself, why can't I just start? And the answer was confusing because he wanted it. He wasn't avoiding because he didn't care. He was avoiding because he cared too much. When something matters, it becomes personal. And when it becomes personal, the stakes in your mind become larger than reality. The task becomes a verdict on your identity. Ethan started noticing a pattern. If the task was meaningful, he hesitated. If the task was safe, he moved fast. The same man who could solve problems quickly would freeze at a blank page. The blank page was never just a blank page. It was a mirror. It reflected his dreams, his standards, and the possibility that his effort might not match his expectations. That's what invisible fear does. It doesn't scream, "Don't do it." It whispers, "Do it later, when you can do it right." And it feels like wisdom because it protects you from embarrassment. Ethan didn't fear work. He feared proof. Proof is honest. Proof removes excuses. Proof shows you your real level. And your real level might not match the story you tell yourself. So he stayed in planning. Planning feels like progress without risk. Planning lets you feel close to change while avoiding the moment that change demands a cost. He watched motivational videos like a person drinking salt water. It felt like relief for a moment, then it made him thirstier. He kept consuming clarity instead of practicing it. One morning, Ethan woke up early, determined to finally begin. He made coffee, sat down, opened the file, and felt a sudden tightness in his chest that didn't make sense. The task was simple. The first step was clear. Yet his mind started negotiating. Check one message. Fix the workspace. Do more research. Start when you can focus fully. He obeyed the negotiation because it felt harmless. But harmless delays stack into a lifestyle, and his life had become a museum of almost started. That day, he noticed something important. The more important the task, the more his brain demanded perfect conditions. But perfect conditions are rare, and waiting for them is a silent way to quit. Ethan began to realize the fear wasn't of the task itself. The fear was of the feeling the task created: pressure, uncertainty, vulnerability, the possibility of looking foolish before getting good. He thought fear had to feel like terror. He didn't know fear can feel like hesitation. It can feel like not today. It can feel like a gentle voice that says, let's avoid discomfort for now. That's why it's invisible. It doesn't attack you. It protects you. It protects your ego, your image, your sense of competence, your story that you are capable, even if you haven't proved it yet. Ethan carried a quiet belief he never said out loud. If I try and fail, it means I'm not who I think I am. That belief turned every meaningful attempt into a risk to identity. Most people don't fear failing. They fear what failing would mean. They fear the label. They fear the shame. They fear the moment their fantasy self meets reality. That's why people prefer comfort. Comfort keeps fantasy alive. Comfort lets you believe you could be great someday, because you never put yourself in a position where you must face the truth. Ethan had built a life around avoiding that collision. He stayed busy. He stayed distracted. He stayed preparing, and the fear stayed invisible because his habits supported it. One evening, he met a friend who had changed noticeably over the last year, not in a dramatic social media way, in a calm, steady way that looked like self-respect. Ethan asked, "How did you do it?" Expecting a trick. The friend said, "I stopped listening to the fear that sounded reasonable." Ethan laughed, then realized he wasn't joking. The friend explained, "There's a fear that shouts, and there's a fear that whispers. The whisper fear is the dangerous one because it hides inside logic." Ethan asked what it sounded like. The friend said, "It sounds like I'll start when I'm ready. It sounds like I need more information. It sounds like I don't want to waste time." Ethan felt exposed because those sentences were his daily language. He had been living inside the whisper fear and calling it discipline, intelligence, and patience. On the way home, Ethan made a decision. He would stop naming himself lazy. He would stop blaming his character. He would treat the problem like what it was, fear management. That night, he created a tool. He called it the invisible fear check. Every time he felt resistance, he had to ask one question. What am I protecting right now? Protecting time? Maybe. Protecting energy? Possibly. But most of the time, he was protecting his ego from being seen as a beginner. He was protecting his identity from discomfort. The next day, he tried the check in real time. He sat down to start, felt the urge to delay, and asked, "What am I protecting?" The answer came fast. My image. He wanted to start at level 10. He wanted the first attempt to look like mastery. He wanted to skip the awkward stage where you are clumsy and uncertain and slow. But the awkward stage is not optional. The awkward stage is the price. Everyone pays it. The only difference is some people pay it early, and others keep paying it forever by never starting. Ethan wrote a sentence on paper. Beginners don't look good. They look consistent. It was a reminder that the goal isn't to look talented. The goal is to become trained. Then he built the second tool, the 10-minute entry. 10 minutes only, with permission to stop when the timer ends. His only mission was to cross the line into action. He chose one goal he had avoided for months, building a skill that could change his career. Not because it was easy, but because it was meaningful, and meaning was where his fear lived. He set a timer. The moment he began, his mind screamed quietly, "This isn't enough. You're doing it wrong. You should have a better plan." He kept going anyway. 10 minutes passed. He didn't feel transformed. He felt something smaller and more important. Relief. Relief from not betraying himself for one more day. He marked an X on a calendar. It felt childish. Then he realized childish is better than invisible. Childish rules can be obeyed. Invisible fear cannot be debated. On day 2, the fear returned with a new mask. You're tired. You should rest. Start when you can do a full session. Ethan recognized the pattern. The fear always wants perfection. He used another rule to break it, the minimum standard. His minimum was so small, it couldn't be negotiated. 10 minutes. That was the floor. Anything above it was a bonus. This mattered because fear thrives in negotiation. If you negotiate with your mind, Your mind will negotiate in favor of comfort. Comfort has better arguments than progress. By day 4, Ethan noticed the fear didn't disappear. It just became less persuasive. It lost power because his actions created evidence that he could move without confidence. Evidence changes a brain. Promises don't. Plans don't. Motivation doesn't. Evidence does. Your mind believes what you repeatedly do, not what you repeatedly hope. Ethan realized his life had been shaped by a simple habit. He obeyed discomfort. Whenever discomfort showed up, he treated it like a stop sign instead of a sign of growth. He decided to flip the meaning. Discomfort would now mean, this matters. It would mean, this is where the work is. It would mean, this is the doorway. He created a third tool, the 60-second doorway. When he felt resistance, he had to do one physical action within 60 seconds before his brain built a courtroom. Open the file, put on the shoes, write the title, send the message, one move, because movement breaks spells. Movement turns imaginary fear into manageable reality. Ethan started applying this to everything: health, finance, conversations. He stopped waiting for the perfect words and started speaking simply. He stopped waiting for the perfect mood and started moving lightly. He learned that invisible fear loves later. Later is where the mind feels safe. Later is where failure cannot happen because nothing is attempted. Later is where dreams go to sleep. The truth was painful. Every time Ethan chose later, he chose a version of himself who remains unchanged. He wasn't choosing rest. He was choosing delay. He began to understand the real cost. Not the cost of effort, but the cost of carry. Carrying an unfinished life creates constant background stress that drains energy quietly. That's why avoidance feels exhausting. You think you're saving energy by delaying, but you are spending energy on guilt, on mental noise, on the constant whisper of, you should. Ethan noticed his mind felt lighter when he acted, even a little. Action didn't just move the task forward. It removed weight from his identity because he stopped seeing himself as someone who disappears. 2 weeks in, Ethan still didn't feel ready, but he was moving more than he had in months. He saw the truth. Readiness is not a prerequisite. Readiness is a result. He stopped chasing confidence. Confidence is a receipt. You receive it after you pay with repetition. Fear tries to trick you into demanding the receipt before payment. Ethan also learned another hidden fear: fear of success. Success changes expectations. It changes identity. It demands maintenance. Some people delay because change would force them to become responsible. That fear is invisible too. It whispers, don't rush. It whispers, be careful. It whispers, you don't need this. But underneath, it means if you change, you can't go back. Ethan didn't want to admit it, but part of him liked the safety of his current life. It was uncomfortable, but familiar. Familiar pain can feel safer than unfamiliar progress. So he built a fourth tool, the two-choice frame. Whenever he felt resistance, he asked, am I choosing comfort now or progress later? He didn't judge. He clarified. Clarification is powerful because invisible fear depends on confusion. It wants your choices to feel blurry so you can slide into comfort without owning the decision. Ethan started owning the trade. If he chose comfort, he said it out loud. That honesty alone reduced the fear's power because fear hates being seen. Then life tested him. A stressful week, poor sleep, too many messages. The exact season where old Ethan would disappear and promise himself he'd restart later. The fear returned stronger. It whispered, this week doesn't count. Ethan smiled because he recognized it. He answered with a standard. Minimum still counts. He did 10 minutes on his worst day. It was sloppy. It was slow. It was enough. And that day taught him the real skill, recovery speed. The people who win long-term are not the ones who never slip. They're the ones who return quickly. Invisible fear tries to turn one slip into an identity collapse. Ethan protected himself with a simple rule. Never miss twice. One miss is an event. Two misses become a pattern. Patterns become identity, and identity becomes fate. As the weeks passed, Ethan began to feel a quiet change. Not a motivational high, something deeper, self-trust. The trust that he can feel resistance and still move. That's what invisible fear steals from you. It steals self-trust. It trains you to doubt your own words because you promise and disappear, until you stop believing yourself. Ethan started believing himself again, not because he said nicer things, but because his calendar showed proof. Proof is the language the brain respects. If you feel stuck, don't only ask, "What should I do?" Ask the more honest question, "What am I protecting?" If the answer is your ego, your image, your comfort, then you've found the invisible fear. Then don't fight it with motivation. Fight it with a system, a minimum standard, a timer, a doorway action, something small you can obey even when your feelings are loud. Use the invisible fear check. What am I protecting right now? Name it. Use the 10-minute entry. Start small. Use the 60-second doorway. Move before you think. Use the two-choice frame. Choose deliberately. Remember this. Fear doesn't always look like fear. Sometimes it looks like planning. Sometimes it looks like patience. Sometimes it looks like intelligence. But if it keeps you stuck, it's still fear. The goal is not to become fearless. The goal is to become someone who moves while afraid. Because action doesn't require courage. It creates courage. Every time you start, you teach your brain that discomfort is survivable. Every time you delay, you teach your brain that discomfort is dangerous. You are training something either way. Ethan didn't escape the trap by finding the perfect plan. He escaped by building a smaller start he could repeat, especially on ordinary days, especially when nothing felt exciting. He learned to respect boring progress. Boring progress compounds. Dramatic progress spikes. Spikes make good stories. Compounding builds real lives. If you want change, stop waiting for the fear to leave. The fear might never leave, but you can leave the fear behind by taking one step while it's still talking. Start with 10 minutes. Start with one sentence. Start with one walk. Start with one message. The first step doesn't need to be impressive. It needs to be real. Because once the step is real, the fear becomes smaller. The mind stops treating the task like a monster and starts treating it like a process. And processes can be handled. You are not stuck because you lack potential. You are stuck because invisible fear has been choosing for you, quietly, politely, with reasonable excuses that hide a simple truth. You don't need a new personality. You need a new rule. A rule that forces movement before your mind can protect you from growth again. Every story reshapes your mindset.